5 Live Formula One.
A dramatic qualifying session under the lights in Saudi Arabia, which saw Max Verstappen take a sensational pole position, and Oscar Piastri will line up alongside him in his McLaren. However, McLaren's Formula E driver Sam Bird, who is alongside me, along with the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. My name's Harry Benjamin. We have to start with Lando Norris crashing out dramatically in the final part of quali. Sam, just talk us through firstly what happened to Lando and why did he crash?
Oh, it was
enough said.
That was a hard watch. So out of turn 1 and 2, everything looked in control, and then through turns 4 and into 5, it looks like he's just missed the apex a little bit at turn 4, then had a little bit of mid-corner oversteer, then got on the throttle in anticipation for the exit, which has lit up the rear tyres. He's had a little bit of more of an oversteer, hit the curb on the exit of 4, which is then the apex at 5, at the wrong angle, and it's just sent him to the scene of the accident on the outside wall. So big disappointment for him. He's got an opportunity to bounce back, of course, in the race, but certainly starting 10th is absolutely not what we expected to see from Lando.
And overtaking is difficult around here, let's face it. You've got down into turn 1 and then really coming out of the final corner and going into it, turn 27, those two opportunities. So let's see what Norris can do. But bigger picture here, Sam. I mean, we come off the back of a Bahrain Grand Prix where Lando Norris didn't get his qualifying lap together, had a good race, but ultimately the spoils went to his teammate Oscar Piastri, and the gap that is between those two in the championship, I know it's still early days, Norris is the leader, but it's now only 3 points. And if Piastri hadn't had a bit of bad luck where he spun off the track in those mixed conditions, he would be leading the championship right now, because he would have been on the podium, or he could have arguably got a race win. So how does Lando Norris, when you come off the back of that, all of our chatter as the media of saying, well, he wears his heart on his sleeve, he's emotional, then he crashes in the crunch point in qualifying in Saudi Arabia. How as a driver do you pick yourself up from that and bounce back and get going again?
Because he's world championship material and he'll be absolutely fine. Yeah, he's made a mistake and he'll be kicking himself, but I don't think there'll be a lack of confidence. He's had a more difficult triple header than Oscar, but he's more than capable and plenty quick enough to turn this around. And Harry, it's so early on in the season. I mean, it's so early. Every single one of those drivers on the Formula One grid right now will have another off day. It doesn't matter who they are, they'll have an off day. They'll have a failure, they'll have a crash, they'll have a qualifying session that they don't maximise. Lando Norris has had that today. But I don't think he's going to be losing sleep over it, let's put it that way.
I know it's early in the season, but Andrew, look, playing the devil's advocate here, Oscar Piastri has stepped up his game so far this season compared to last year. And Norris, no matter what stage of the season, cannot have a big crash like that when it comes to fighting for pole position.
Well, if you're going to fight for pole position, you can't crash, that's for sure. But I think Sam's right. Look, I mean, it's very rare that a driver has a perfect season, because not everything's in their control. Sometimes they might do everything perfect themselves, and then something else happens that they lose a race through or lose a pole position through. It just so happens that today, Norris has made the mistake himself. Verstappen, I think they're big. The McLaren drivers have two concerns each. The first concern is the other McLaren driver, and the second concern is Verstappen, who at the moment is having a pretty flawless, perfect season. But even he can't do that all year. Even if he is perfect all year, something will happen to him that will cause him to lose points, as Sam says. So it feels like a blow for Norris now. It is a blow for Norris now, but the race is tomorrow. And the McLaren, so far at least in Saudi Arabia, has been so fast on a race run. And the reason for that is that it looks after its tyres a lot better than any other car. The tyres automatically get hot in the race. You can't stop that happening lap after lap after lap. You can control them as best you can. But the McLaren is way above every other car in keeping its tyres in better condition in races. And although the McLarens got stuck behind Verstappen in Suzuka 2 weeks ago, and although overtaking is difficult in Jeddah, there are DRS zones that can work for you at this track, which wasn't the case at Suzuka. So I suspect Norris will come through the field relatively quickly, and I would not be surprised at all to see him on the podium at the end of the race.
I think the double DRS, the one in sector 3, and then the one out of the final corner going across the start-finish line will be Lando Norris's biggest friend. I also feel like that is an area that Oscar Piastri will have to exploit if he's to try and beat Max Verstappen.
Well, we also saw a couple of years ago Max Verstappen, of course, come through from the middle of the pack and end up towards the front and winning the race.
Yeah, so, but back then he could have started, I don't know, in Diriyah and won.
But again, it comes down to he had a rocket ship underneath him, and so does Lando Norris in that McLaren. Well, let's hear from Lando Norris speaking after qualifying.
Hi, Lando. I mean, tough to know where to or how to word the question, but I mean, how are you feeling after what happened out there in Q3?
I'm disappointed, but I'm fine. Thanks.
Good. I mean, how have the team been with it, and how do you kind of bounce back from that as well?
I mean, they got a lot of work to do, sadly. Yeah, I mean, it's been such a smooth, positive weekend so far, so disappointed to have such a big setback. But yeah, I've got to take it on the chin, you know, apologise to the team, to my mechanics and the engineers, and try to go again tomorrow. But, you know, the car's quick, the car's been good all weekend, so have to think how to overtake the cars tomorrow.
In terms of the damage, will everything be all right for tomorrow? And like you said, it's been pretty good so far this weekend, bar that one moment. Does that give you confidence that you can recover some good places tomorrow?
I think a good amount, but you know, as Oscar showed, we're not head and shoulders above the rest. You know, George is only a 10th off and Max is on pole, so I don't expect to get to the top few, but you know, there's definitely a few cars ahead that we need to finish ahead of. So you know, if we can aim for a top 5 or something, then I'll be happy.
Thanks, Lando.
Norris then with work to do, but he's got the machinery underneath him to try and carve through the pack, so we'll be watching that one intently across the 50 laps. But I mean, we mentioned Verstappen already. Pole position, 10,000ths of a second splitting him and Piastri. It was another flawless lap from the reigning champ.
Yeah, he's relentless, isn't he, Harry? He is, dare I say, he's the best driver in Formula One by quite a distance, in my opinion. He doesn't make mistakes. He's so fast all the time, maximizes the amount of points he can get out of that Red Bull. However, and you might disagree with me, I think that Red Bull is better than what we make it out to be. I think that they're closer to McLaren than what we say they are. They hide their performance in free practice, and then every single qualifying he seems to make a big step. The flip side to that argument is he's just absolutely trounced his teammate by 9/10ths of a second, but he always seems to make that step from pre-practice to qualifying.
We've also got to bear in mind the type of circuit this is. This is a high-speed circuit, lots of quick corners. Verstappen's pole lap was made in the first sector. Now, anyone who's watched any of the practice sessions and qualifying at Jeddah will know what an absolutely awe-inspiring sector that is, with quick corner after quick corner, especially after the first chicane. He was quicker than Piastri by 0.123 seconds in that first sector. Piastri was then quicker than him in the second and third sectors, but that was enough to keep him ahead on pole position, and that's a combination of a car that's more comfortable in high-speed corners than it is in low and medium-speed corners, and a driver, as Sam says, at absolutely the top of his game.
Well, after the red flag, Max Verstappen went out on a used set of soft tyres. He did what we thought was a great lap and just secured that provisional pole by 1,000th of a second. He then radioed to his engineer and said the tyre wasn't ready at turns 1 and 2. So that lap was absolutely critical, in my view, to learning about the tyre warm-up that he needed for the new set of soft. He then came back in the pits. They didn't put it back in the garage. They sent him straight out on another set of new soft tyres. Firstly, that meant he he was fueled for multiple laps. Secondly, he knew what to do with the tyre warm-up to get more performance for Sector 1.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was an advantage for him over Piastri, because of course Piastri was the only driver who completed a lap before the red flag, and that's obviously the lap that Verstappen beat with his used tyre run, or semi-used tyre run we should call it, because it probably had about a half to two-thirds of a lap on that set of tyres that he went out on. But it was almost certainly an advantage over everybody else, because no one else apart from Red Bull ran that strategy. Piastri didn't need to, because he'd already had a quick lap on new tyres, so he already had the knowledge in his brain. But everybody else probably wasn't going to get in the mix with Verstappen and Piastri anyway. So I think it's moot as to whether that made that much of a difference in the battle for pole position. But of course you can't say, because if Verstappen himself hadn't done that, if they'd just gone for the one lap, it was probably a strategic masterstroke for Red Bull for him in their situation.
Well, let's hear what the reigning champ had to say after taking pole for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix.
Hi Max, I mean that was pretty breathtaking for everybody to watch. In the room we were watching as well, the feeling after that must be pretty sweet. And it was only 2 weeks ago that we were all praising your pole lap in Suzuka. How does that one compare to what you delivered today?
Yeah, I mean, every pole lap is a bit different naturally, but this track is like, you need a lot of commitment. It is very enjoyable to drive, and the car is also giving you that confidence. And I think with the changes that we made into qualifying, it allowed me to be a bit more comfortable. And yeah, I think what was just nice again was the improvements that we were making throughout qualifying. You know, Q1, Q2, Q3, just every time a little bit faster. The team was helping me as well with some corners where I was not entirely happy yet, and yeah, just find a little bit more lap time. And yeah, of course, very proud that we were able to put it on pole again.
And you said after you hopped out of the car that you felt that the car had come alive at night. I mean, can you expand a little bit on that? Was it the nighttime conditions, something like that?
Yeah, just compared to what most of the teams have, like FP3, McLaren was so far ahead that I think no one really thought that it was possible to beat them. So it still shows, of course, our limitations. But then in the night, when everything cools down a bit more, we are more competitive. Now, tomorrow is another story. You know, in the race when the temperatures are again hot on the tires, when you're on your stint, it will be tough. But yeah, we are going to give it everything we have.
So in that case, what's, I suppose, the big challenge, the major challenge that you face tomorrow?
I mean, mainly keeping them behind, actually, because they have been so fast and all the race runs so far this weekend compared to any other team. Now I do feel a bit better with what we have done to the car, but I'm not sure it's, let's say, going to be enough. But yeah, that's the exciting bit. We don't fully understand or fully know what is going to happen, and the only thing that I do know is that I will give it everything.
Lovely. Thanks, Max.
Verstappen then with another lap for the ages, maybe not quite as spectacular as his pole lap in Suzuka a few weeks ago, but certainly another blinder. Just want to come back to what you were saying, Sam, about the Red Bull car is maybe better than actually we've been made to believe it is, because we've got to look at the disparity between his new teammate, 9/10 of a second. So I just wonder, this is, look, Tsunoda is clearly not the same level as a Max Verstappen, but this is just history repeating and repeating and repeating. So where is this car actually?
Well, I think we're seeing some of the best of Max Verstappen. That's pretty clear. He is driving wonderfully. And I'm not saying that it's better than the McLaren, but I think it's slightly closer than, we every weekend we seem to go, it's between the McLarens, it's only between the McLarens. And then every weekend he's there. And he's there in qualifying. And okay, they don't quite have the race pace longevity, I don't think, over McLaren, but I certainly think over one lap pace you can never ever discount him, and they always seem to find something for quali.
It depends on the circuit, basically, as to whether it's able to compete with the McLarens or not. The McLaren is the best car overall. It's quick on every kind of circuit, but its advantage is magnified on certain types of circuits. So, for example, in Bahrain, Verstappen was nowhere compared to the McLarens. Those types of corners, slower corners, longer corners, that really affects the Red Bull's balance issues. These kind of corners in Jeddah, same as in Suzuka, high-speed corners where the car's, high-speed performance can play out. Then it becomes, basically, as we've seen in Saudi Arabia and before that in Japan, it becomes pretty much a match for Verstappen, if not slightly better than it, in Verstappen's hands. The imponderable is the driver. It's not that instructive to compare Verstappen to Tsunoda and say he's massively outperforming the car, because Tsunoda is not on the level of Norris or Piastri or Russell or Leclerc. He's nowhere near that level. We don't know what that car would be like in the hands of one of those sorts of quality of drivers. We only know what it's like in Verstappen's hands. We don't know what Norris or Piastri would do in the Red Bull. We just can't know. But what we can say is that driver-car combination on high-speed circuits is close to a match for McLaren over one lap. But the key is what I just said at the end there, over one lap. I don't think the Red Bull will be a match for the McLaren over a race distance. And I'd be surprised, I'm not saying it's impossible because he's an exceptional, extraordinary driver. I'd be surprised if he's able to keep it back, the McLaren, over a race distance tomorrow in Saudi Arabia.
I mean, what could save Max Verstappen tomorrow is safety cars. So normally around this circuit we see at least one. And if he can get some free pit stops when everybody else needs to pit as well, that could keep Max Verstappen in front. We know that he's good at restart. He's got the widest car in Formula One normally. I think it's going to be a thrilling race. Really, really do.
Well, so we think the Red Bull that is starting on pole position might not have the same, or doesn't have the race pace in it compared to the McLaren that starts alongside it in Oscar Piastri. So Piastri here must be feeling confident that he's got this. He just needs to focus on what? Getting a good start, heading into turn one, side by side, and getting his elbows out, because we know Verstappen will happily drive somebody off the track.
Well, the race isn't won at turn one, so
it can be lost.
Yeah, exactly. So Oscar Piastri will just be focusing on doing his thing and maximising his start. If that means he stays P2 at the beginning, he will know though that his tyre life will be better than Max Verstappen, so maybe that's the area that he'll try and capitalise on, and try and make Max Verstappen work his tyres harder than what he wants to, and push him into maybe pitting early or using up too much tyres and then falling away.
Yeah, no one goes into a race with Verstappen thinking, I've got this, okay? That's not what happens if you're a Formula One driver. He's too good, okay? But McLaren will be impressing upon Piastri, and I don't think he'll even need it impressing upon him, that he doesn't need to sweat the first corner too much. They will be looking at all the opportunities they can exploit with that car. They can run longer to pit stops. They can push Verstappen for tyre life, for example. You know, there's all sorts of ways in which they can win the race. There's a lot of ways of losing it if you're going to try to go toe-to-toe with Verstappen at the first corner.
And Piastri will know that if he can get a good result, he's got a good chance of taking the championship lead as we head into a little week off before we then come back in Miami. Let's hear, though, from the man who is lining up second, Oscar Piastri.
Hi, Oscar. I mean, that was pretty breathless for us all watching that qualifying session. I mean, how are you reflecting on that after coming oh so close to getting that P1 spot?
Yeah, obviously hurts a little bit to be so close, but I was pretty happy with my lap, to be honest. There wasn't a whole lot left in it, so leaving tonight pretty happy. I think we've had to work pretty hard to get the car really dialed into the window, and it's not been quite as simple as last weekend, so we've done a lot of hard work, and I think the competition is a bit closer this weekend as well.
In terms of working hard to get the car into the right window, it's looked pretty good up till now throughout practice. Can you just expand on, I suppose, what the challenges there have been getting it quite right in qualifying today?
I think through the weekend the car has clearly been quick, but it's kind of been a bit what we've said a few times. It's not been the easiest to get the lap time out of it, and that's kind of been a little bit of a struggle this weekend, just being consistently quick. I think when we get the lap together, it's clearly very good, but I think just trying to be consistent's not been that easy. But I think into qualifying it felt quite good, so I think we got it into a good place.
So in terms of tomorrow and that consistency that you were just talking about, is that something that you're hopeful you can achieve tomorrow and perhaps get that win?
Yeah, I think we're in a good place. I think the pace in the car is good. It's going to be incredibly tough to overtake with the dirty air, but I think our pace is strong, so I won't rule it out. There's a few more DRS zones, so let's see what we can do.
Thanks, Oscar. Good luck tomorrow.
Cheers.
Piastri then on the front row, and just behind him, Sam, George Russell in the Mercedes. Another stellar qualifying. His flying season continues.
Yeah, super solid. Again, he's been one of the most impressive guys on the grid so far this year. He hasn't made any mistakes. He's been super consistent and yet again puts it in the top 3. So George Russell doing a really good job.
Now, how much are we going to see a fight for, I suppose, those final podium positions? Because Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is just behind him, and he's been looking nip and tuck with Russell. I think George Russell will go with Verstappen and Piastri for the first 10 or so laps. I think he'll stay in that kind of DRS train. I don't think the Ferrari's got the pace. I think that it's a little bit too far off, and I think that then you'll see quite a decent fight between Leclerc and Antonelli, potentially. But I may be wrong. I may be completely wrong, but I think George Russell's got a bit too much for the Ferrari right now. Andrew, how impressed have you been by George Russell's continual good results?
Very impressed. I think, there's, obviously Verstappen is probably the outstanding driver of the season so far. Piastri has had the edge on Norris, but behind those three, I think it's actually hard to call between Russell and Leclerc. They've both had really good seasons so far. And so I actually think Leclerc will have the legs of Antonelli in the race, possibly. But let's see. I think it's so close, but I think that I don't know. I don't want to call it. I think I don't see Russell competing for the win with Piastri and Verstappen.
Well.
But then if Verstappen, it might be that the Mercedes had better race pace than the Red Bull. It did have on Friday. In which case, if Verstappen keeps the lead, then Russell will stay in the race potentially, at least until the first pit stops.
The other thing about Russell is obviously he's got a very young rookie teammate in Kimi Antonelli, who's supposed to be a generational talent, and I'm absolutely sure he is. But every race weekend, George Russell has been 0.4 of a second quicker. In every session, it seems to be 0.4, and Antonelli isn't making any inroads into that 0.4 just yet. George Russell is operating at an extremely high level and showcasing why he's now definitely that team leader.
Let's hear from him.
Hey George, good to see you after all that. It was pretty pulsating for everybody watching.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's probably quite similar for you in the car.
Yeah.
And you said you'd be happy with a P3 at the start of it all, but how are you reflecting after coming pretty damn close?
Yeah, I am happy with P3. I would have liked a bit more, and I felt I felt there was a bit more on the table. Because it was my one and only lap, we had no banker on the board. I went quite conservative with my tyres, so my tyres were probably a bit too hot. So I was just worried about turn 1. Like if I made any mistakes at 1, that's game over and I could be down in P10. Sector 1 was great, Sector 2 was great, and then Sector 3 I just lost like a 1/10 and a half on myself, and the gap was a 1/10. So I'm like, kicking myself a bit, but it's a long race tomorrow and anything can happen.
Based on what you've experienced so far and out there tonight, does that give you plenty of hope that you might be able to do something spectacular tomorrow?
I think it depends on turn 1, to be honest. Realistically, if we stay in the order we qualified, I think we've got a shot at being in the mix. We can do something different with the strategy, maybe to try and do an undercut or an overcut. If Oscar gets into the lead, I think we're all quite realistic that he'll go off into the distance, and most likely Lando will start on the hard tyres, so he will probably be in the lead at one point in the race, and who knows what can happen there. Like if there's a timely safety car, that could really benefit him as well. So it's not going to be straightforward. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
George Russell then, who starts the Grand Prix from 3rd ahead of Charles Leclerc. Kimi Antonelli rounds out the top 5. And just while we were on the kind of Ferrari chat, Leclerc, good result for the Ferrari in 4th. Hamilton, 7th. How do we weigh up that? I almost think there's still gap to find, clearly, but I think that could have been worse for Hamilton.
It could, but I've just seen quite a stark statistic, which is that he's only qualified higher than this once all year, and that was in China when he was 5th. He's saying up and nowhere all weekend, and that's true. He's obviously got a lot of work to do to get onto par with Charles Leclerc. And in terms of qualifying gaps, Sam's just talked about the one at Mercedes. Leclerc on average is 0.227 seconds quicker than Hamilton. that's a big gap for a 7-time world champion to be looking at after the first 5 races of the season. So he's got a lot of homework to do with that car.
Can he come through in the race though, Sam? Because I don't think we're expecting the Ferraris to challenge for the win, but Hamilton is traditionally, recent times, better in the race on a Sunday than he is over one lap on a Saturday.
It's so hard to call, Harry. Who's he got? He's got Carlos Sainz in front of him in P6. We know that Williams actually has gone really, really well here this weekend. And with the help of DRS, I think Sainz could even hang on to the back of Antonelli. It's not out of the question that Williams goes with a kind of mid-stroke lead group. So Hamilton will have his work cut out for sure. Absolutely, it'll be difficult for him to gain ground, and then you've got Lando Norris starting 10th, who you would have thought will be overtaking and passing him at some point in the early to mid stages of the race.
I think it's going to be a really intriguing first few laps of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. That first opening section will be quite good. Carlos Sainz, I think, will be massively pleased to get 6th place ahead of, well, the man who replaced him at Ferrari.
Yes, great job by Williams. Just on the race, what's interesting about it is that Pirelli have gone one step softer on all the tyres, and the medium, which most people you would expect to start the race on, that was the soft last year, and only one driver used it in the race at all. So that first stint on the medium is going to be very tough for all the drivers. So that just adds to the intrigue going into the race.
Just to finish off with, I suppose, that battle in the midfield, it definitely looks, Sam, like it's advantage Williams and Carlos Sainz. Albon just on the periphery, he goes from 11th spot. But Pierre Gasly, off the back of first points for Alpine and Bahrain, managed to qualify 9th, and it looks like Alpine have found a bit of a turn of pace, even though we know they have an engine deficit. But round here, even with the high-speed corners, he's still able to keep himself inside that top 10. Yeah,
really solid job. I think of the best of the rest, I think Gasly is always performing at a very high level. So yeah, to get a 9th, okay, he was gifted a 9th because of Lando Norris's mistake, but even so, to make a Q3 appearance is a good job, and I think Alpine will be pretty pleased with that.
Albon 11th, ahead of Liam Lawson 12th. That's his best qualifying since this season actually, and now returning to the Racing Bulls team. Alonso getting the most out he can out of an Aston Martin that is off the pace in 13th, ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Ollie Behrman rounded out the top 15. Lance Stroll 16th. Jack Doohan, Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon and Gabriel Bortoleto make up the grid. Okay, I know both of you haven't want to really call anything so far, but who's winning the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix?
Piastri.
Yeah, Piastri as well.
Okay.
And I have to say that, don't I?
Come on, there was hesitation there.
Do you know an interesting thing? I'm looking at that grid and I'm really wondering, what do Red Bull do with Yuki Tsunoda? Because they know that Norris could be a bit of a threat potentially come the end of the race. Do they potentially kind of throw Tsunoda under the bus to make sure that he holds Norris back to stop Norris maximising his race? I don't know, but all I do know is that I can't wait to watch it.
If I'm not mistaken, I feel like, was it Saudi Arabia last year where Kevin Magnussen held up pretty much almost the entirety of the field to allow his teammate Nico Hulkenberg enough of a gap to pit and not lose position?
This is what I'm thinking, because you can do that around this circuit, and Kevin Magnussen did it brilliantly. It's single file in Sector 1. If Yuki Tsunoda wanted, he could drive 2, 3, 4 seconds a lap off the pace in Sector 1 to make sure that Norris is not in the fight come the end of the race. If Max Verstappen thinks Lando can get a lot less points, that's the worry for me.
That really would be fulfilling the remit of the number 2 driver at Red Bull, wouldn't it?
But that's what he is. And if that's what Helmut Marko and Christian Horner want from him, that's the kind of thing he could do potentially.
Well,
but time will tell.
Let's see how it all unfolds over the course of 50 laps. Thank you, gents. Thank you, Andrew Benson. Thank you, Sam Bird. You can join us. We'll have live coverage of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We're going to be on 5 Sports Extra from this one. The lights go out at 6 o'clock in the evening on Sunday, and we'll have build-up from 5:45. We hope to see you then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.